Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to bring another NBA trade deadline predictions video. This one centered on the Houston Rockets. So if you're a big time Rockets fan, let me know down in the comment section below. How long have you been a Rockets fan for? I'm sure some of you are newer fans to the game, and I'm sure I've also got some real long-term lifers out here in the comment section. So I'm excited to see who's been a fan for how long. I'm going to be leaving little hearts on every single one of those comments on today's video. And let's jump into that video preview here now. First of all, we're going to start with 3 predictions for the Houston Rockets ahead of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. If you didn't see my Spurs video with the trade deadline predictions there, that might be an interesting one for you as well. I'm going to cover as many teams as possible between now and the February 6th NBA trade deadline. And these predictions can be very wide ranging. Some of them might be very, very specific, as in a specific kind of trade I could see or maybe don't see the team making. We're also going to talk about potential trade targets theoretically in some of these trade prediction series videos. And then we'll also just talk about organizational goals. What are the long-term plans of the organization? In this one, what will the Houston Rockets look to do at this trade deadline and then potentially after the trade deadline as well? I have a pretty unique prediction in today's video that I'm excited for you guys to all see. I want to hear your thoughts throughout this video as well, so don't hesitate to comment your thoughts, your opinions on what I say in today's video. Then also a reminder, and this is a super important reminder, I will be live on the channel here at Utility Sports on YouTube for the entire week of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. So you need to grab your popcorn, make sure you have it on your schedule. I will be live that entire week, and I'm talking long streams, 6, 7, 8 hour streams. So if you're at work, plan on bringing earbuds so you don't miss out on the content here. I'll be keeping you up to date on all the news, so that way you don't have to be checking your phone, looking at Twitter all the time. I'll be covering everything Shams Charania reports and every other mainstream media person who will be breaking news. So this is going to be your one-stop shop for everything NBA trade deadline this year. Really excited for that. And let's jump into prediction number 1 now. My first prediction, and this is a super important one that I thought I needed to start today's video with: no franchise-altering trade yet for the Houston Rockets. And when I mean franchise-altering trade, I'm talking about a significant deal, a trade where the Rockets send out a large collection of draft picks, some of their young core, and obviously the Rockets fan base has a real love for that core 7 nucleus that the Houston Rockets have. And honestly, even though there's so much talent there, there's maybe too much talent. They can't all get on the floor together at all times. Reed Shepherd obviously has taken a backseat this year as a rookie, although I'm still very, very optimistic on his long-term future. And I think one thing that I do definitely need to say right now, if you're a Rockets fan, you should be ecstatic. The long-term future of your team, the long-term goal and optimism should be through the roof right now for what this Rockets team can become. They have been so good at basketball this season. It's not just a potential thing anymore. It's not just, well, if everything hits. They are just flat out really good at basketball. Amen Thompson, of course, in the starting lineup has turned into an absolute demon. I know for those who have watched me on the channel here for a while, going back to my 2023 NBA draft coverage, you and I both know that this is not surprising. I was in love with Amen Thompson as a prospect. I thought that his game, specifically the functional tools and athleticism in combination together, made him one of the easiest, safest bets in the entire draft that year, with perhaps the second highest ceiling behind Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, Wemby's had a good start to his career in San Antonio, but now with Amen Thompson kind of gaining a bigger role through some injuries and having more opportunities to really cement himself and exert his talent and assert himself offensively especially, we've seen what Amen Thompson can be, which I think is an emerging, budding superstar in the NBA, and he very well will be the Houston Rockets' best player over the next few years. Now, obviously, Jalen Green's had I think a very good season for himself. There have been, again, some of those ups and downs we're accustomed to seeing with Jalen Green, but I think this year, especially post January 1st, there's been more ups than downs, and I think that's a really good sign for what he's going to be as a player moving forward. Alperen Şengün gets double teamed, triple teamed more often than pretty much any other player on the planet besides a few. And I think with that in mind, you look at this Rockets core. not only do they have the top end talent, but they have other auxiliary players around it, guys who can fit into roles. Tari Eason, one of the best defensive players in the NBA. His defensive creation rate is through the roof. He makes so many different things happen on the defensive end of the floor, and then offensively, I mean, he's shooting the ball well. He's been productive. It kind of goes back to his LSU tape. Cam Whitmore's been very, very good in some of his limited minutes, obviously kind of finding and carving out that six-man role right now as the lineup's been changing a bit with some of those injuries. The Rockets, they have just so much young talent. They have obviously the veteran leadership. So while it might be easy to look at the Devin Bookers of the world, the De'Aaron Foxes of the world, I just don't see the Rockets doing that quite yet. And that kind of fits into the timeline I've constantly been providing for the Houston Rockets anyway. I don't think this prediction, if you've been watching for a while, should be super surprising. I think the Rockets, Rafael Stone and the front office there wants to see how all of their young guys perform in a playoff setting. Do they win a first round series? I think right now, if you're a Rockets fan, you should be pretty optimistic about that likelihood. Can they win a second round series? Well, maybe if they face off with a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who they're 3-0 against in the regular season this year at the time I'm recording this, well, very likely the Rockets could feel comfortable and confident going into that series. They have the length, the athleticism, the size, and the talent to defend Memphis, and they also have the offensive creation ability with obviously the high-low combination between Şengün and Thompson out of the dunker spot. They have the offensive rebounding to, I think, provide challenges and problems for Jaren Jackson Jr. on the defensive glass. There's a lot of different ways I think Houston can get active and get busy in that series. So, could we be talking about the Rockets as a Western Conference Finals team a couple of months from now? And I don't think that would be the most shocking thing in the world. So, if you're a Rockets fan, you've got to be optimistic. I think the Rockets brass internally wants to see this young core together, not just through this regular season when things are going very, very well, but they want to see when a bump in the road might come. Is that in the playoffs? Maybe that bump in the road never comes. Maybe the Rockets make some crazy run to the NBA Finals. And I think the big message here, if you're a Rockets fan, you should be really, really excited. This team is really good now. The average age of this roster is still incredibly young. And of course, the signings of Fred Van Vleet, Dillon Brooks, they were met with a lot of criticism. Rafael Stone caught a lot of flack for that. I was one of the few people on YouTube, I was one of the few content creators who did not dislike those signings at all. And I think it's aged very, very well for the Houston Rockets. And I think with that in mind, they're in a position where they do not have to make a franchise-altering trade yet. They have control over Phoenix's picks. They have control over their own future picks moving forward. They still have that Brooklyn Nets swap in 2027 as well. So Houston's got so much flexibility moving forward. It doesn't need to be a panic trade at the trade deadline, but they do have a contract or two or maybe four that they could look to move at the deadline if a smaller deal does make sense. And again, we're not talking franchise altering. We're talking about a maybe upgrade on the margins type of deal or a long-term addition deal. They have 4 expiring contracts that I think could very readily be traded. Now, they technically have 6 if you include Fred Van Vleet and Aaron Holiday. We'll talk about those in a minute here, but I want to focus on these 4. Steven Adams at $12.6 million. He's at the very top of the pyramid, the biggest expiring contract that I realistically could see the Rockets trading away. Then Jeff Green and Jock Landale both make $8 million. Jeff Green, of course, is in the true final year of his contract. Landale has non-guaranteed years moving forward, but essentially if a team were to trade for that contract, it would be looked at as an expiring, which is why I have him included on the graphic here. And then also Jae'Sean Tate, a player who I think has done some nice things for Houston, especially you think about kind of his tenure post James Harden. I think he was one of the more kind of opportunistic players that they had. You go back to the David Nwaba, that kind of core nucleus of Rockets at that point in time, and Jae'Sean Tate's really been the one that's been able to stick in the league. I still think at this point in time, though, if a trade materializes, Houston has these contracts to make something work. Now, a common name that you're going to hear between now and the trade deadline is Cam Johnson. He's going to be highly coveted by a bunch of different playoff teams, both in the West and Eastern conferences. But I think when it comes to Houston making a trade, a deal for Cam Johnson, I think, is going to require too many draft picks, and it would sacrifice some of Houston's long-term flexibility to make future trades. So I think with that in mind, I think, again, Houston probably not ready to fully step on the accelerator and make a bigger trade where it costs multiple first-round picks, but maybe a smaller trade where maybe they can walk out with Robert Williams III in some kind of creative deal, whether that includes some form of pick swap or if that includes some kind of trade where there's like 4 or 5, 6 second-round picks going out the door, and some of these expiring contracts. Something like that I think makes more sense. Obviously, the Time Lord Ime Udoka relationship and connection from Boston is what kind of guides me to suggesting Robert Williams III, and I think he would be a very good fit onto this roster as an added rim protector for when Alperen Şengün is out of the game. And people will point to some of Robert Williams III's injury history, and while that is concerning, that might be why Houston can jump in and acquire him for so cheap relative to his talent and production level when he's actually on the court. So I think those things in mind are very, very important for Houston to consider. A smaller trade on the margins, one that maybe they can find a guy in his mid to late 20s who, instead of Steven Adams or instead of Jeff Green or instead of Jock Landale, could be longer term pieces, kind of the 7th, 8th guy in the rotation for Houston moving forward. And while, yes, they have such a good, great young core nucleus of young players, at some point they're either going to have to probably sacrifice some of those young players because of CBA restrictions and spending, and they're all going to be worth a lot of money, or realistically one big kind of composition trade where they put 2 or 3 of those young players together in a deal to get to, player X, Y, or Z, whether that be Devin Booker or De'Aaron Fox in the future. Again, not at the 2025 trade deadline like I mentioned earlier, but long-term flexibility is still the name of the game for Houston. They can make a small but meaningful upgrade right now this year without sacrificing that, and these expiring contracts are their best way to get to some of those numbers. So I expect Houston to trade at least one of these 4 players that you see on the graphic now. Then prediction number 3, and this one is a little bit of a post-trade deadline prediction, but I think it's a very important one and one that I needed to talk about in today's video. Prediction number 3, I think the Houston Rockets plan on picking up Fred Van Vleet's team option for 2025-2026. Before the season this year, when Şengün and Jalen Green had not yet extended, obviously they did extend, but at the time when they had not yet, there was a pathway for Houston to actually operate with cap space, and it would have hinged on leaving Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün basically unextended, keeping their bird rights, keeping their cap hits on their cap table without giving them that actual guaranteed money, which they ended up doing. In that pathway, they would have had to basically renounce Fred Van Vleet, and it would have been a very complicated matter for Houston to really try and meaningfully upgrade on their roster. You look at kind of the falling out that Philly's had with how bad their team has been by sacrificing so much depth for Paul George. The Rockets, I think, just honestly internally looked at that situation and said, I think we're better off keeping our young guys, getting them under contract now, and working through trade flexibility, which is why they went and made the deal with the Nets and Suns, where they got these Suns picks from the Nets for the Nets picks back. And it allowed Brooklyn to go into their rebuild officially, and it gave Houston further flexibility, still with a Nets swap in 27, but also some real Rockets picks, or some real Phoenix Suns picks, to add into deals if they want to go after some type of star player sometime down the road. And now with that in mind, the Rockets feel like, first of all, if they're going to make some kind of big trade, it's better to have salaries on the book. Fred Van Vleet's $40+ million salary could either be an expiring tool in a trade next year, or he could be looked at as a valuable player to have around whatever star other player they end up trading for. So again, I think the core message of this video, Houston doesn't do anything big yet. They don't sacrifice any of their flexibility to do something big in the future, and they're going to keep this overall team core intact. They might make a small, meaningful upgrade on the margins like we talked about with maybe someone like Robert Williams III, but they're not going to overhaul this roster in any way. They're not going to do anything crazy, anything dramatic, and I think that should be music to Rockets fans' ears. That's exactly what you want to hear right now with how the Houston Rockets have been playing, with how this season has been going specifically. You should be really, really, really happy with how your team is performing. Again, with a lineup going into the playoffs of Fred Van Vleet, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason. The list goes on and on. There's so much talent here. Cam Whitmore, of course, we've talked about. The Rockets are both loaded now and for the future, and I think everything is pointing toward the Houston Rockets just being a tremendous basketball team for quite a while in the NBA. I think, it kind of snuck up on people how good they would be this year. I looked at them as a team that would have been a top 6 playoff team. I don't really think I would have picked them to be top 2 in the Western Conference, and that's one, a testament to Ime Udoka as a coach. It's a testament to the developmental progression of a lot of these young players. and also kind of the get after it mentality there. And I think that's one of the most important things. We haven't talked about it enough in the video here. The Rockets have that kind of young bull energy to them where not only are they very talented, but they want to win, and they want to win really, really badly. And I think if you look at the differences between the Steven Silas era and the Ime Udoka era, not only are players way more prepared for games, but I think the obvious talent level is completely different. One thing that Silas could not really overcome there in Houston. But then secondly, kind of the overall chemistry, the overall feel of the team is just massively different. There's just an energy, a vibe about this team that the Rockets didn't have during the Victor Oladipo, Christian Wood era of Houston Rockets basketball. And again, Rockets fans, you guys went through it post James Harden for a little bit. You stuck with the team through some really bad lineups, some really bad performances. I mean, you guys watched Kevin Porter Jr. start pretty much every single game for 2-3 years. It's incredible to me that Rockets fans, after going through some of those dark days for a short period of time, they come out on the other end of the tunnel with a ton of light, a ton of awesome basketball to watch. And again, if you're a Rockets fan, I keep saying it, you should be very, 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 very excited about this team going forward. I really hope you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more future content. Don't forget, we will be live on the channel very, very soon for the 2025 NBA trade deadline. So this is the place you're going to want to be. Hope you guys really did enjoy today's video, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.